Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 97 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, this episode of Camera Position continues our short little series of podcasts about the Gallery Photographica Exhibition and Competition, International Photography Exhibition and Competition in San Francisco. I was honored to be asked to be the juror for this exhibition, and so we've spent a little bit of time talking about the process of jurying an exhibition of this type, and also just now highlighting some of the more interesting photographs of the group of images that I selected for the exhibition. So again, my job was to take 1,755 photographs and narrow that down to 40 photographs to be exhibited. And in the last podcast, I talked about the prize winners, the first, second, and third place images. And in this podcast, I'd like to just highlight a few other images that I thought were really interesting. And so here in no particular order are a few pictures. They will be both in the Camera Position app that I know some of you have, and then also on cameraposition.com for you to be able to take a look, and of course on the Gallery Photographica.com website as well. So let's just start out with this terrific image by Sandra Chen Weinstein, and it's called Poppy's Fish and Chips, and it's a photograph of what looks like a fast food type restaurant. And this young woman serving up some French fries, and there's something about the look that she has. And for me, it was one of those photographs that spoke exactly about the moment of exposure, the moment where she is both at work and lost in her work, but also her mind on something else. And there was something about that moment, about her look, about her apron and the beautiful blue bow in her hair that somehow just all came together for me. And again, it was one of those pictures that at the beginning of the go through, as I went through all of these images, it was one that kind of stuck out for me. Another one that stuck out for me was by the Italian photographer Barbara Beltramello. And hopefully I got that right. Italian is my sort of second language. I try anyway. And the photograph is La Quilonne, and it shows what appears to be a young boy who is flying a kite in a narrow street, which I first of all just think is a wonderful thing for a kid to be doing. But there is something about his pose, the exact moment again that the image was made, and the way in which his dark skin is silhouetted against this beautiful white wall, pristine whitewashed wall behind him. The light quality is beautiful. The moment of exposure is beautiful. And the place where the subject is in the composition all sort of plays nicely with the compositional idea of light and where the body is and where the light falls and so forth and so on. And his gesture is just so really beautiful. Moving on, Charles Corda, a United States photographer whose photograph of an art dealer at Art Miami in December of 2011 is just so stark and beautiful. This quality of light that is flat, looks like it comes from a flash unit, perhaps slightly off-camera flash. This light that's flat, and the subject turns out to be kind of flat, and this the whole scene sort of seems to be this plasticky scene of technology and light, and the plastic chair, and the way it all sort of works together. It was bland in a way that was so incredibly beautiful that I really liked it. And not bland as a photograph, but bland in terms of this sort of plastic world that this art dealer seems to live in. I thought it was just really an interesting image. Another photograph that I liked very much and that made it into the exhibition is by the German photographer Patricia Eikert. And the photograph is Just Wait Here, number 3. And what was interesting, and I've mentioned this before, even though these photographers were anonymous, it was fairly clear when I came upon a group of photographs that were stylistically very much the same. And Patricia Eikert's photographs, I could tell, were stylistically the same. They had this sort of mid-century modern look and feel to the interiors that she was photographing. And the photographs themselves were about waiting. They were about people who were waiting for something to happen in a waiting room or waiting outside of something, waiting for something. We don't really know what it is that they're waiting for, but I did know the titles of these images, even though I didn't know the names of the photographers, and the fact that all of these were about waiting and all of them had these quirky mid-century looking interiors to them. And this particular image with the woman bending down to put out a cigarette apparently in an ashtray on the floor, which was strange, and the strange purse that's on the floor and the sunglasses on the table and her expression and the thing that she's holding in her hand, which appears to be a book or a magazine. The whole thing, again, kind of came together. A moment that was really beautiful, an interesting arrangement of the subject in the frame, the sort of monotony of the tan and greenish colors of the props in the scene, but then the blue of the woman's jacket, all really worked for me quite well. And then another photographer, Italian photographer, Marco Ferraris, and his photograph, End of Reality, Due di Uno, 2 of 1, Due di Uno. And this photograph was, again, one of a series of pictures. And the series of pictures was very interesting because they were all these sort of not aerial photographs, but rather photographs taken from some height up with a very strange sense of light, a very strange sense of like sort of voyeuristic looking at the subject. I really was fascinated by the way in which Marco's photographs were showing me a variety of things that I wouldn't think that I would be interested in looking at. So here's this little meeting of a few sort of tiny little figures down in the far away part of a street scene underneath a street light at night. And there's a mystery to it that I really liked. I liked the strange elongated format where the majority of the picture space didn't have content or information in it for me to look at. The whole thing really sort of seemed, again, to come together really well as an image that talked about the voyeuristic quality of photography. And lastly, the last of the 6 images I wanted to talk about here in this episode of Camera Position, the Israeli photographer Miri Davidovitz in a photograph called Sorona. And it's a very strange, stylized group portrait of a group of people standing outside of a building. And first of all, the first thing I thought of when I saw it is one of my very favorite photographs by Paul Strand, the family in Italy, sort of standing by the doorstep, and everyone sort of paying attention to the fact that they're being photographed, but not completely paying attention. And I think in some ways that Davidovitz here is perhaps paying homage in some ways to Paul Strand. It also has a quality of August Sanders portraits of people. There's a sort of ramrod stiffness to the people in the picture that I found really appealing. At first, it gives the illusion of being a monochrome or black and white photograph, but it is, in fact, just a very, very dramatically desaturated color photograph. So just very small hints of the idea of color in the picture, which is also another interesting thing. But the idea of a group portrait of these people sort of definitely posing for the camera, but not particularly all paying complete attention to the process of being photographed. And I thought it was a really interesting photograph, and I thought that it, if in fact it is intended to be some sort of homage to perhaps Paul Strand or August Sander or other portrait photographers like that made these sort of stylized pictures of people, I thought it was very successful in that regard, and I was really happy to have that picture be one of the images in the exhibition. Something else that's worth noting about all of these photographers whose work that I'm showing you here, and it is almost completely common for almost every photographer who made it into the exhibition, and that is that they all have fairly nice websites, good web presences. And those web presences tell me a couple of things about them. And again, these are things that I didn't know until after the photographs had been judged into the exhibition and competition. So here are some of the things that they tell me about them. First of all, it tells me that they are fairly serious at what it is that they're doing, that these are not just sort of people who are kind of casually making photographs, but people who are, again, working on that body of work that we talk about so much. Secondly, it showed me something about their backgrounds, because their websites, almost to the person, show me something about where they've exhibited, work that they've published, information about their experiences in photography. And one of the things that just absolutely fascinated me was that after I had judged the photographs and after I had sort of figured out who all had gotten into the exhibition, by golly, if the people who had gotten into the exhibition weren't all quite accomplished photographers. In other words, there were very few one-hit wonders among this group of talented photographers. Most all of them were people who had been practicing photography for quite some time, who had had a variety of experiences of exhibition, publication, so forth and so on. Again, none of them were photographers that I knew prior to seeing their work here in this competition, and yet the stuff that rose to the top was all from photographers who had some modicum of success prior to getting to this exhibition. And I don't know exactly what that tells us, but it certainly tells us that persistence is key. Continuing to work, continuing to build that body of work over time, and continuing to be serious about the idea of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. That simply making beautiful photographs, while in and of itself is an interesting and useful occupation, just making beautiful photographs without some sort of idea behind them really does not end up being the thing that gets you in the place that you probably want to be. So I found that to be really interesting, and the fact that everyone has a website. And again, I've linked all of those websites off of cameraposition.com, and I also have linked them on the Camera Position app in the PDF that you can get from the app. So hopefully you'll take a look at their websites, because they all have a really interesting body of work to take a look at and see where this particular image that got into the exhibition fits within their larger body of work. Well, thanks again for joining me on this episode of Camera Position, and I will sort of be moving along here from the Gallery Photographica portion of this series of podcasts, and we'll start talking about some other ideas. I did want to mention that I will be at the gallery where the exhibition will be held on Saturday, March 24th. I will be at the gallery, Michelle O'Connor Gallery on 17th Street in San Francisco. And again, I've linked the directions to that on the cameraposition.com blog. So I'll be there for a reception. And that reception centers around part of the gallery walk for the Society for Photographic Education Conference, which this year is being held in San Francisco and happens to coincide with this exhibition. So I'm excited to be able to see the exhibition on the walls and hopefully meet some of the photographers. In fact, I know a number of them will be there that particular evening, and so I hope to perhaps see you there as well as hoping to see some of you at the SPE, or Society for Photographic Education Conference in San Francisco that weekend of the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of March. So thanks again for joining me, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.